Good to be with you. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk, Mississippi. I am happy to welcome back someone who has been on this show a number of times, although in a much different role than he's sliding in today. Scott Colom, who is the Lowndes County District Attorney and is running for United States Senate against Cindy Hyde-Smith and others that may end up in that race as well. We visited a number of times when we've been in West Point at Sally Kate Winters Family Services. Scott, obviously the district attorney and very involved in the prosecution of some of those nasty cases. Scott, it's good to see you this morning. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely, and I think we've got a lot of ground to cover. I do want to give you the opportunity just right out of the gate to tell us why it is that you're running for Senate.
Thanks. Richard, I'm a seventh generation Mississippian. My wife and I, when we graduated from schools outside the state, we both chose to come back to Mississippi to really give back to the state that we love. We're raising our kids here. We've started businesses here. As you know, I was blessed to be elected district attorney in 2015. I've worked hard to keep my community safe at the courtroom fair. Proud that I have a 94% conviction rate. Tried the toughest cases, murders, rapes, sexual assaults of children. And my big frustration with our current senator is I think she's putting D.C. politics above what's best for us. When it comes to the terror policy, for example, Richard, I think that we got to have a senator that's focused on terror policy that works for Mississippi, works for our farmers, works for our consumers. And I don't think that's happening right now. I also am a big believer that we've got to raise the minimum wage. Richard, we haven't raised it and who knows how long, and Mississippians deserve a raise, especially with the way costs are. I'm also out of the box. I think that we need to have no income tax for teachers and cops. And the reason I believe that, Richard, is because teachers and cops, they're in unique professions in the sense that they have a lot of responsibility. Teachers are responsible for our future. Cops are responsible for keeping our communities safe and our courtrooms fair. The federal government doesn't do very much directly to help them. So I don't think they should be taxed at all from the federal income level. And the final point, Richard, I think is very important is, how many people do you know in Mississippi that make over $600,000 a year? You don't know many, Richard, because they live in New York, they live in California, they live in Boston. And Cindy Hyde-Smith, she just voted to cut taxes 3% for people who make over $600,000 a year, permanent tax cut. And she paid for those tax cuts by putting the health care of at least 140,000 Mississippians at risk and putting at least eight hospitals at risk of closing. And when I'm elected to the Senate, Richard, I'm going to repeal those health care cuts and I'm going to save our hospitals.
So those kind of your platform, those talking points, you certainly know that campaigning is different than governing. And
right.
There are a lot of people that have ideas when they are campaigning. They say, this is what I'm going to do when I get there. And then reality, they get to D.C. and there's not a lot that gets done unless you're in the majority. What makes you think that you will have the ability to deliver on some of those campaign promises when you actually get to D.C., as opposed to just using those as kind of talking points within a campaign?
Well, I'll tell you, they're more than talking points to me. They're values. And I'll tell you, here's where I think I'll be different, because I'll be a common sense, independent senator. Too much of our politics, both on the left, the right, Republican, and Democrat, is all about the political party. And senators, not just on the Democrat side, not just on the Republican side, are willing to give away their voice for the party. And I'll take an example. Look at Senator Lisa Murkowski when it came down to the bill that just passed. She got a lot of carve-outs for Alaska, right? Because she used her vote as her voice for Alaska. And we've got to go back to senators in the tradition of Thad Cochran. Me and Thad Cochran and I may not have agreed on everything, but I knew that his number one priority was looking out for Mississippi, bringing resources back to our state. And if you use your vote as your voice for Mississippi and not get caught up in national politics so much, I think you could be a lot more effective.
You'll forgive me for pushing back on that a little bit when you say I'm going to be an independent senator, and yet when you ran for district attorney, you accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars from an organization that was funded by George Soros, who is kind of the ultimate Democrat and whose idea of the justice system. And by the way, I'm going to give you credit. I don't feel like you have operated as a district attorney in the way that a lot of DAs and a lot of law enforcement people have that have been funded by George Soros. So I'll give you credit for that. But I don't understand how you say I'm going to be an independent senator, and yet your campaign in 2015 accepted more than $700,000 from a Soros-backed organization.
Well, I didn't accept the money. They gave it to a political action committee. You
Right.
said that a couple of times, and I wanted to correct you. I didn't accept the money. But here's what's important, Richard, is over the last 10 years that I've been district attorney, the citizens of my community have seen that I'm an independent thinker. Nobody tells me what to do. I do what I think is right based on the crime, based on keeping my community safe. And those are the values I've had as district attorney. And that's why I've continued to get reelected. 2019, I ran unopposed. 2023, I won 10 by 10 points. And the other thing I want to point out is I don't think it's fair, Richard, that nobody ever talks about who's giving money to Senator Hyde-Smith. If you look at her campaign finance reports in 2025, she's getting a lot of money from corporate PACs. Well, why are they giving her money? Why are they giving her money? Because she's voting to cut taxes for people that live in New York, Boston. She's caught up in DC politics. So if we're going to talk about campaign finance, we got to talk about it both ways. And the final point I want to make.
Well, I'm good with that, but go ahead. Go ahead.
I agree that there is too much money in politics. There's too much. The solution to that is small dollars have to counterbalance that by supporting candidates that they believe are going to be independent and they're going to be Mississippi first type people. And all I'm telling the listeners of this podcast is that's who I am. Those are my values. And that's why I've kept getting reelected. And I'm proud to be a seventh generation Mississippian that's always going to look out for our state.
Yeah. One point of order, available as a podcast, but live on 12 radio stations across the entire state of Mississippi. I guess maybe the only thing that I agree with Bernie Sanders on is that, yes, we do need campaign finance reform. So, yeah, I'm completely with you there. But it does feel like kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth when you're quick to say, oh, no, that was a PAC that supported me. That wasn't money that went directly to my campaign. But then you immediately point to, yeah, but Cindy Hyde-Smith got money from PACs to support her campaign. So I feel like it's one way or the other on that. But I suppose we could kind of get off in the weeds in that and miss the larger point in this. What's been the response from people that you visited with, Republicans and Democrats, independents alike in Mississippi, to your candidacy?
Well, they've been excited, honestly, because I think there's a lot of frustration with DC politics, Richard. I think that everybody who has common sense recognizes we've become too partisan as a country, and we can't admit that the other side does anything well. For example, I think President Trump is doing a great job securing the border. I think he should get credit for that. I think President Biden did not do a good job securing the border. I also agree with the approach on H-1B1 visas in that I don't like foreigners getting jobs that Mississippians could get, because I can tell you as a district attorney, I see a lot of people out there who could use those jobs, and they can take care of their families. They can help grow our state. And so when I say I want to be an independent voice, I don't think about issues in the lens of DC politics. I think about it through the lens of what's best for my state. And that's why I've been able to get reelected as district attorney. That's why I have a high conviction rate. That's why my cases don't get overturned on appeal. I mean, I'm not afraid to run on my record, Richard. And here's the thing that I want everybody out there listening to ask. Throughout this campaign, and Rich, I want you to ask this too, because I know Senator Hyde-Smith, she'll come on your program. Sure. Why doesn't she ever talk about what she's done for Mississippi? She's talking about me. She's making up names. She's attacking me. I want to focus on my record and her record. And she can't focus on her record, Richard, because she is too focused on DC politics. She's voted against money that's gone to our cities to build roads. She's voted against money for the Amtrak expansion to New Orleans. Now she shows up to the ribbon cuttings, but she's not telling people she's voting against the money. You know this, Richard. Dad Crocker will be rolling over his grave.
I got to ask you about this because I've only got a minute left. And we'll talk again, I promise, as long as you're willing to come back. I got to ask you about the Parody phone call. I was critical of that. I said, you may have heard what I said, you may not have. If somebody advised you to do that, you should fire them. And if you did that on your own, you better hire somebody to help you with messaging. Tell me about the Parody phone call.
Well, here's what's interesting about that, Richard. I don't know if you follow that TikTok trend. Let me tell you what's interesting about it. The TikTok trend is all about forgiveness. The point of it is, despite you stopping me from becoming a federal judge, I'm not running against you for personal reasons, right? That was the point of it. But here's the difference between me. Now, if I was a normal politician, I would point out, Richard, that Senator Hyde-Smith had the most cringe joke of all time. She joked about going to a public hang. But I'm not trying to get people to vote out of hate for Cindy Hyde-Smith. I'm trying to get them to vote out of love for Mississippi. What's best for our state? That's my message. Let's focus on Mississippi. We can't afford to have a senator that's focused on D.C. politics.
Scott Colom, Lowndes County District Attorney. He is running for United States Senate against Cindy Hyde-Smith and perhaps others. I appreciate the time and hope we can visit again soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it.
We'll take a time out. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi.